The bells of an old cathedral are still ringing. A bride stands alone at the altar in a dress that isn't hers, and the man she was promised is 40 minutes gone. Behind her, 80 strangers whisper. In front of her, a child too young to understand swings her legs and waits for cake. And on the floor between them, a folded note she is too afraid to read. Then the great oak doors swing open like thunder. A man fills the doorway. Charcoal suit, gray at the temples. Two more men at his shoulders, eyes moving across the room like they are counting the exits. He does not hurry. Men who are certain never hurry. She has never seen him before in her life. And yet, something about the shape of him in that doorway feels like a thing she once saw in a bad dream and could not name. He starts down the aisle, straight toward her. The whispering dies all at once, and nobody in that church, least of all the bride, has any idea what he has come to take. The bells up St. Augustine's were still ringing when I understood that he wasn't coming. I'm telling you this now. An old woman with gray in her hair and a grandchild's crayon drawing held to the refrigerator, with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. I'm telling you because some stories you have to live a long time before you can tell them right. You have to let them settle, like sediment in a glass of river water. You have to wait until the mud sinks and the thing turns clear, and only then can you hold it up to the light and see what it actually was. This is the story of the worst morning of my life, which was also, though I had no way of knowing it then, the first morning of the only life that was ever worth having. My name is Nora. Back then, it was Nora Whitfield. I was 28 years old. I was standing at the front of a cathedral I could not afford, in a wedding dress that did not belong to me, holding a bouquet of white roses. I was strangling without meaning to. The stems were bent. My knuckles had gone white around them. And the man I was supposed to marry was 40 minutes late. 40 minutes is a long time in a church. You don't know how long until you've stood in one. Long enough for the whispering to start. Long enough for it to grow. Long enough to hear it move through the pews behind you like a draft you can't find the source of. 80-some people back there. Most of them his family, shifting in their seats, murmuring behind their hands, checking their phones and then trying to pretend they hadn't. And every one of those small sounds landed on the back of my bare neck like a hand. My sister Bridget stood beside me, her palm warm on my shoulder, steadying me the way she'd been steadying me our whole lives. "He's not coming, Nora," she whispered. "Don't say that, honey. Just don't." But I knew. God help me. I knew it in my bones before the bells even started. There was a text message on my phone I'd been too afraid to read all the way through. It had come in an hour earlier. I'd read the first line, just the first line, and then I'd turned the phone face down on the pew, as if turning it over could keep the words on the other side from being true. "I can't do this, Nora. Taking on another man's kid. His kid. That's what my daughter was to him, in the end. Not a child. Not a little girl who'd learned to call him a name she'd practiced in the mirror. A kid. A responsibility. A weight he'd decided at the very last, possible second, that he could not carry. His name was Russell. 8 months he'd let her call him. New daddy. 8 months of promises. A house with a yard. A swing set he was going to build with his own 2 hands. A pool he kept saying he'd show her. The 3 of us, a real family at last, after everything. And up at the front pew, in her little white flower girl dress, my 5-year-old daughter swung her legs and waited for the cake. She had no idea her whole small world was about to come down around her. Her name is Posey. She was the reason for all of it. She was the reason for everything I had ever done and everything I was about to do. She was the reason I worked 2 jobs. The reason I took night classes at the community college, after double shifts at the diner. The reason I fell asleep over my textbooks at the kitchen table with a yellow highlighter still uncapped in my hand, and the smell of fry grease still in my hair. She was the reason I had saved for 11 straight months to afford a real makeup artist for this one single day. Because I wanted, just once, just one time in my whole hard-scraping life, to feel beautiful. The makeup was running now. I could feel it. A hot line tracking down my left cheek, where the first tear had already gone before I gave it permission. Posey was 5 years old. She loved the color purple. She loved unicorns. She loved asking questions that no adult on earth could answer. Like, where does the dark go in the morning? And do fish get thirsty? And if you love somebody, do you have to love them, even when they're being mean? She had asthma. She had a laugh that could fill a room and spill out into the hall. And she had a way of slipping her small hand into mine whenever she sensed. The way children sense weather coming. That something in the air had turned. She didn't have a father, not a real one. Her real one had walked out the door before she was old enough to hold his face in her memory. And so for 5 years I had been everything to her, mother and father both, roof and floor, the walls and the locks on the doors. I was so tired. You don't know tired. Forgive me, but you don't. Not until you have been the only thing standing between a child and the cold. Not until you've lain awake doing arithmetic with numbers that won't add up, no matter how you move them. Rent, medicine, the light bill, the inhaler that costs more than a week of groceries. You don't know tired until you've gone to bed hungry on purpose, so that a little girl across the hall doesn't have to. Russell was supposed to be the end of being so tired, and Russell was 40 minutes late. My best friend Rachel slipped back in through the side doors of the cathedral. She'd gone out to call him. I turned, and one look at her face told me everything there was to know. She gave the smallest shake of her head, the kind you give at a hospital, the kind that means no. He left a note, she mouthed. She crossed to me and pressed a folded square of paper into my hand. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I closed my fingers around it and felt it crumple, and thought, distantly, the way you think things in a car crash. This is the moment my life ends. The bouquet was shaking. My whole body was shaking. I leaned toward my sister. I need to get her out of here, I whispered. Posey, I can't let her watch this. I can't let her see me come apart in front of all these. And that was when the great doors at the back of the cathedral opened. They did not open quietly. They are heavy doors at St. Augustine's. Old oak banded in black iron, the kind they don't make anymore. The kind that have been opening and closing on 200 years of weddings and funerals and christenings and confessions. They swung open with a sound like thunder, and the sound rolled up into that vaulted ceiling and hung there a moment among the rafters, and then came back down on all of us at once, and every single head in that church turned toward the doors. The whispering stopped. It stopped all at once, the way the crickets stop when something large walks into the yard. He stood in the doorway, tall, broad through the shoulders, a charcoal suit that even from the front of the church, even through my tears, I could tell had cost more than I made in a year of double shifts. His dark hair was swept back from a face that looked like it had been cut out of something harder than skin. Granite, maybe, or the prow of a ship. He was not a young man. There were lines carved deep around his eyes, gray coming in at the temples. He was a man of 50, I'd have guessed, though he carried those 50 years the way a mountain carries snow. Like it weighed nothing, like it had always been there. He was flanked by 2 other men, both in dark suits, both with eyes that moved around that church the way a lighthouse beam moves across water, taking inventory of every exit, every shadow, every threat. And behind them, more men were coming in, quiet as cats, spreading out along the walls, positioning themselves at the doors. I didn't know him. I was certain of that. You do not forget a man like that, and yet, something about him struck me as almost familiar. The shape of him in that doorway, like a figure I'd seen once before in a bad dream and couldn't quite place on waking. Who is that? Bridget breathed beside me. I couldn't answer her. I couldn't move, because the stranger had fixed his dark eyes on me, only on me, out of all those 80 people, and he had started down the center aisle toward me. Slow, certain. The unhurried walk of a man who has never once, in his life, doubted that he would get where he was going. And I stood there pinned in place, like a moth on a board, and I watched come. He stopped 3 feet from me, close enough that I could smell the roses I was crushing in my fists. close enough that I had to tip my chin up to see his whole face. Nora Whitfield. His voice was low. He didn't raise it. He didn't have to. It carried without effort all the way to the back pews, and it laid itself down over the silence, like something heavy and final. "My name is Dominic Oletta," he said. He said it the way you'd state a fact that should already be known. Like the name itself was supposed to mean something. Like it should land on me and explain everything. It meant nothing to me. Nothing at all. I shook my head. I had no idea who he was. And something flickered across his face when I did that. The smallest crease appeared between his brows. As if he had walked in expecting fear, had braced himself for it, had maybe even counted on it, and had gotten only my confusion instead, and didn't quite know what to do with the difference. "For Sfia," he said. "He isn't coming, I know." My voice was a thread. "I know. He worked for me." He let that sit between us a moment, like a stone he was setting down. "He owed me a great deal of money, and he came to believe that marrying you would slow him down. So he chose not to." I felt it land. I felt the whole terrible shape of it land on me at once. Because do you understand what he was telling me? He wasn't telling me Russell had left because of Posey. That would have been a wound, but a clean one. A knife wound, the kind that closes. He was telling me that Russell had never wanted me at all, that I had been a prop, a cover story, a respectable face for a thief to hold up in front of his own while he counted out his stolen money and planned his disappearance. That's a special kind of cruelty, isn't it? To be left is one thing. A woman can survive being left, but to learn that you were never truly chosen in the first place, that you were a piece on a board, a move in someone else's game, that's the cut that doesn't close. Bridget stepped forward. She put herself half in front of me. My sister, all 5'3" of her in a dress she'd rented for the occasion, planting herself between me and a man surrounded by armed guards. "You can't be serious," she said. She didn't do anything. The stranger didn't even glance at her. His eyes stayed on me. "I know she didn't," he said. "She collateral." He left her behind to face what he owes, and then Posey was there. She had wandered up from the front pew, her flower crown gone crooked, and she slipped her small hand into mine, the way she always did when she felt the boat begin to tip. "Mommy," she said, looking up the long, long height of the stranger. "Where's Russell? Is the wedding canceled?" The stranger did a thing I did not expect. He knelt down. This enormous man, in his $1,000 suit, surrounded by guards who actually tensed when he did it, who moved their hands an inch toward their jackets when their boss lowered himself down onto the cold marble floor of that church. Because in their world, I would learn, you do not kneel. You do not put yourself low. You never, ever give up the high ground. He gave it up, he got down on his knees. "To my daughter's height." "Hello, little one," he said. "What's your name?" She studied him. Solemn, with that long, careful gaze that small children save for very old dogs and very large men. "Posey, I'm 5. She held up the fingers to prove it. All 5 of them. Proud. "Are you Russell's friend?" Something went dark and quiet in his face. "No," he said. "I'm not Russell's friend." She turned that over in her mind. "You could watch her doing it." "Is that why he's not here?" she asked. "Because he's scared of you?" And the man laughed. It came out of him rough and startled, like a door that hadn't been opened in years, dragging on a rusted hinge. It surprised him more than it surprised her, I think. It surprised everyone. A laugh, in that church, on that morning, was the last sound any of us expected to hear. "Yes, Piccolina," he said, the foreign word soft in his mouth. "That's exactly why." He stood back up, slowly. His knees clearly had opinions about it, and he looked at me again, and I am going to tell you what I saw in his face, because I've had a lifetime to understand it, and I understood none of it that morning. I saw grief. Not for me. For something of his own. Something old, and buried, and walled away. He looked at me, standing there abandoned in my borrowed dress, spots and somewhere beyond those hard, dark eyes. A door cracked open onto a room he kept locked, and for half a second, no longer, I watched a dangerous man remember a soft thing he had lost. I didn't know what it was yet, but I saw it. and I never forgot that I had seen it. "I have a proposition," he said. "What proposition?" He said it plainly, no softening, no cushion under it. "Marry me instead." The roses fell out of my hands. White petals scattered across the white marble floor, like the first snow of a winter nobody is ready for. "What?" The word came out of me as barely a breath. "Your fiancé refused you," he said. "I'm offering to take his place. The debt is erased. You and your daughter have protection, security, a future, all of it." Today, that's insane. My voice came back to me from somewhere. A little of the steel I'd forgotten I owned, buried way down under all that grief. "I don't even know you. You knew him a year. Look how that turned out. That landed too." I watched him watch it land. "And if I refuse?" I asked. And here is where the man changed in front of me. His voice went cold. The warmth that had been there for Posey, the warmth that had surprised all of us, it drained right out of him. And underneath it, I saw the other man. The one all those guards had come to protect. The dangerous one. "Then I collect what I'm owed by other means," he said. "Your fiancé has family, they have assets. Business is business." It was a threat. A real one. I knew, looking up into that carved face, that he meant every word of it. But here is the strange thing. The thing I would not understand for years, even as he threatened me. His eyes were asking me, almost begging, like a man who had forgotten every gentle word he ever knew, and was reaching for me with the only language he had left. The language of debts. The language of threats. Because somewhere down in him, something wanted, more than anything, to step between me and the whole cold world, and he did not know how to say so. So he said it the only way he knew. God forgive him. It was all he had. I looked at my sister. She was shaking her head hard, mouthing no, don't, no. I looked at Posey, watching all of this with the patient bafflement of a child who knows the grown-ups are deciding something enormous but cannot tell what. I looked at the cake table. 3 tiers I couldn't afford, waiting under the lights, the little plastic bride and groom on, top facing, a future that was never going to happen. I looked at my own reflection, gold and warped, in the great stained glass window above the altar. A woman in a borrowed dress, and I thought about all of it at once. The medical bills stacked on my counter, the asthma treatments, the nights I'd gone to bed hungry, the eviction notice taped to a door I no longer had the rent for. I thought about 5 years of being the only thing between my daughter and the cold, and how tired I was, how bone-tired, how I genuinely did not know how much longer I could keep standing up. And I thought, with a clarity that frightened me, the police cannot protect us from whatever this man is. I had seen the guards. I had seen the way the priest looked at him, the way you'd look at weather rolling in over a field. There was no calling for help here. There was no cavalry coming. There was only the choice in front of me, and the floor I was standing on, and the little hand in mine. I looked back up at him. "I have conditions," I said. Something moved in his face. The ghost of something. Almost a smile. "I'm listening. Posey comes first. Always. Her happiness, her safety, her future. That is not negotiable." "Agreed. I'm finishing my degree. Nursing. I have put it off for 5 years, and I will not put it off one more single day. I insist on it," he said, and I could tell he meant it. "Education is the one thing nobody can take from you in the dark." That surprised me. The way he said it. Like, it came up out of somewhere true and old in him. "And I want the truth," I said. "About what you are. About what world I'm walking my daughter into. I'm not asking for your secrets. I'm asking whether I'm putting her in danger." He went quiet at that. "The hardest of my conditions, I'd come to understand. You deserve that," he said at last. "We'll talk, not here, but you'll have the truth, all of it." One more thing, my chin came up. Higher this time. "This may be an arrangement, but I will not be a possession. I will not be a trophy on your arm. I expect respect." And something I never expected to see came into his eyes. "Admiration. I would expect nothing less," he said, "from the woman I choose as my wife." He held out his hand. It was a big hand, scarred across the knuckles. There was a story written in that scar, and I would learn in time that it was not a nice one. He held it out to me, palm up, open, in the wreckage of my ruined wedding. And then he did a thing I'll remember to my grave. He waited, he didn't grab. He didn't reach, he didn't take. He held his open hand out into the air between us, and he waited for me to decide. I looked at that hand for a long time. The bells had stopped by then. The whole church had gone so silent I could hear the candle flames. 80 people holding their breath. My sister holding hers. My daughter's small fingers in my left hand, and a stranger's open palm waiting on my right. Then I put my hand in his. My hand was shaking. His was steady and warm, and it closed around mine so gently that I felt something I had no name for and no reason to feel. Not fear, not in that moment, safety, just a flicker of it. A thing I hadn't felt in so long that I almost didn't recognize it when it came. Like a word in a language you spoke as a child and have not heard since. "We have a deal," I said. He turned to the priest. Poor man, who looked like he had swallowed his own collar. "Father, we're ready to proceed." And then Posey came skipping back up the aisle, scattering her flower petals, as if nothing in all the world had gone wrong, and the stranger knelt down a second time, down to her height again. "May I have your permission?" He asked my 5-year-old daughter to marry your mother. She tilted her head. That direct, unfiltered gaze of hers, the one that goes straight through a grown person and out the back and reads whatever's written on the wall behind their soul. "Will you make her cry?" she asked, like Russell did. The whole church heard it. I felt it go through me like a blade slipped between the ribs. "No, Piccolina," he said. "I won't make her cry, promise?" She held out her smallest finger, her pinky. It was trembling a little, because even at 5 years old, she understood that this was serious business. This was the most serious business there was. The man looked at that small trembling finger as if it were the most dangerous thing he had ever faced in his life. And I believe now, knowing what I know, that it was. He had made promises to terrible men in dark rooms. He had made vows over guns and money and graves, and none of them, not one, had ever frightened him the way that pinky finger did. He hooked his own finger around hers. "I promise," he said. She nodded, satisfied. Business concluded. "Okay, but you have to come to my tea parties." Russell never came to my tea parties, and there it was again. That rough door opening in his chest. "It would be my honor," he said, "to attend your tea parties." The ceremony was a blur. I spoke my vows in a voice that did not sound like mine. Far away, underwater, I promised to honor a man whose full name I had learned 11 minutes before. But when he spoke his vows, his voice rang out clear, every word of it. Like a man making proclamations he fully intended to keep, come fires for flood. And I remember thinking, even through the fog of that terrible day, that Russell had never once in a year said anything to me in a voice like that. Not when he proposed, not when he promised, never. The ring wasn't Russell's ring. God knows where Russell's ring ended up. One of Dominic's men had vanished during the chaos and come back with a small velvet box. And inside it was a platinum band set with a single clean diamond. And it slid onto my finger as if it had been waiting its whole life for my hand. And no other. "You may kiss the bride," the priest said. And then he flinched, just slightly, as if he wasn't entirely sure the instruction applied to whatever this was. I froze. In all the speed and the noise and the impossibility of it, I had not once thought about this part. The stranger looked at me, and he asked me a question with his eyes. He was asking permission to kiss his own bride at his own wedding in front of his own men. Because he had promised me respect not 10 minutes earlier, and he was a man, I was only beginning to understand who kept his promises. All of them. Especially the small ones. I gave the smallest nod. He raised his scarred hand to my cheek. Gentle. A man that size has to learn gentleness on purpose. It does not come to him for free. He touched the very place where the tear had cut its little road down through all that careful, thick, expensive makeup, and he kissed me. Light, brief. A few seconds, no more. When he drew back, "I was breathing as if I had run a long way, Mrs. Oletta," he said softly, and his accent wrapped itself around the name as if the name were something fragile that might break. Scattered applause. Awkward. Mostly from his own men, following some script in their heads about how a wedding is supposed to end. Posey clapped the loudest of anyone, and my sister Bridget stood rigid as a fence post at the edge of it all, white as the roses scattered on the floor. That was the morning I married a stranger. We drove away from the cathedral in a long black SUV that smelled of new leather and, faintly, of some expensive cologne. Posey scrambled in and immediately began pressing every button she could reach on the armrest until the ceiling of the car lit up in shifting colors. "Cool," she kept saying in a hushed voice. "Cool, cool." I sat very still beside her, pale, I'm sure, watching the only town I had ever known slide past the tinted glass, the diner where I worked the morning shift, the community college where I took my night classes, the little park with the broken swing where I brought Posey on the rare afternoon I could afford to do nothing at all. "You're pale," he said. "Are you unwell?" "Just processing." He let me process. He didn't try to fill the silence. I would come to learn that about him in time. He was a man entirely comfortable with silence, the way only people who have spent a great deal of time alone ever are. He pressed an intercom button and spoke to the driver. "Bruno, water for Mrs. Oletta, and apple juice, with a straw." For the young lady, the apple juice appeared within 30 seconds. "With a straw." "What happens at the reception?" I asked. I was grasping for something solid, something practical. People do that when the ground goes out from under them. They reach for the small, fixable things. Place cards, schedules, who sits where. All those people back there, they're Russell's people. They must be frightened. "My men will explain there's been a change," he said. "Anyone who wishes to leave may leave. Anyone who stays will be treated well, and the child will have her cake." I watched him in the dark glass of the window, and slowly, despite everything, I believed him. "The part about the cake at least, and after?" I asked. "After the reception?" He met my eyes in the reflection. "After, you come home, both of you, to your new home." The word home dropped into me, like a stone into still water. I watched the rings of it go out and out across the surface of me. "Don't look so frightened," he said. And then, lower, the only gentle thing he had, "I told you, I won't make you cry." From the back seat, Posey looked up from her control panel. "Is your house big? Do you have a pool?" Russell promised me a pool. He never showed it to me. "Yes, Piccolina, there's a pool, and a garden, and a room that can be yours. Decorated any way you like." Her eyes went enormous. "Can it be purple?" "Purple is my favorite color in the whole world. Purple it shall be," he said, and I did not know yet that he had already had it painted. The reception was a strange and tender thing. Half wedding, half armed operation. His men stood around the walls of that rented ballroom, like furniture that watched you. Russell's relatives slipped out the side doors with their eyes down, gathering their coats, taking their leave as of a celebration that had stopped being theirs. And in the middle of all of it, a little girl with chocolate frosting smeared across one cheek, dancing on a dangerous stranger's polished shoes, gripping his enormous scarred hands, and shrieking with delight while he turned slow, careful circles under cheap twinkling lights. I watched my daughter laugh in a stranger's arms, and I did not know what on earth to feel. Bridget cornered me in the ladies' room. Of course she did. I'd known she would. One of his men stood outside the door, far enough away that he couldn't hear, close enough that we both knew he was there. "Nora, what in God's name is happening?" Her hands gripped my arms hard. "Who is this man? Are you being threatened?" "It's complicated, Bridge. That is not an answer. He's powerful. Connected. Russell stole from him and ran. I checked under the stall doors. I'm collateral." That's the word he used. "So that's your problem now? You marry a criminal because your no-good ex was a thief?" What was I supposed to do? Call the police? Did you see that man come through those doors? Did you see how the priest looked at him? My voice dropped to almost nothing. "These are not people the local police can handle, Bridget." And if I'd refused, he said he'd go after Russell's family instead. The innocent ones. Those old people in the third pew. His parents. This is Stockholm Syndrome before you've even been kidnapped. It is not, and I surprised myself with how certain I sounded. He knelt down for Posey Bridget. Twice. He asked a 5-year-old's permission to marry me. A man who means to hurt us does not kneel down and ask a child's permission. She started to cry. At what cost, Nora? What is he going to want from you? Will you have to? Her voice broke clean in half. Will you have to share his bed? And I'll tell you the truth, because I made myself a promise that I would tell this whole thing true. The thought of it sent a heat through me that was not entirely fear. But I pushed it down where I pushed everything. I don't have a choice right now, I said. I have to protect Posey, and this is how I protect her. The door opened. One of his men. Polite, quiet, Mrs. Oletta. Your husband requests you for the cutting of the cake, Mrs. Oletta. The name still felt like a coat that belonged to somebody else, pulled on over my own clothes. We cut the cake together. His hand laid over mine on the silver handle of the knife, and when it came time to feed each other a bite, that little tradition I had insisted on, for Posey's sake, because she had been so looking forward to it, I hesitated. He felt it. With gutsty I was already beginning to recognize in him. He took the smallest possible bite from my fingers, and then he turned immediately, before the moment could curdle into something neither of us wanted, and he offered the next bite down to Posey instead. She squealed, frosting everywhere, on her nose, in her hair. I want you to understand something about that one small moment, because I have turned it over in my mind 10,000 times in the years since. He read the discomfort in me in less than a second, and he rearranged an entire wedding tradition on the spot, smooth as water finding its level, so that a 5-year-old got the joy of it, and her mother got the mercy. A man who, I would learn, solved most of the problems in his life with force and fear. And the most delicate, most careful work I ever once saw him do was steering my daughter's wedding day around the broken glass of my heart so that the child never felt a single one of the cuts. Then came the dance. He drew me onto the small before I could think to refuse. His arms slipped around my waist, gentle but certain. I can't dance, I whispered, panic rising in my throat. We must. It's expected. Lead, you're afraid, he observed, as we began to move. Of course I'm afraid. I just married a stranger who threatened a family if I said no. Should I be relaxed? A smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. No, your fear is reasonable. But perhaps it's misplaced. What does that mean? His eyes held mine as we turned. It means I have no intention of harming you or that little girl. Quite the opposite. Then why force this? Why not just let me go when Russell ran? He was quiet a moment. His steps faltered, just slightly, on the worn parquet. I have had my eye on you for some time, he said, and a chill went down the length of my spine. Because that should have terrified me. A strange and powerful man, admitting he'd been watching me, and some treacherous part of me, God help me and forgive me, was flattered instead. It got late. The guests trickled away. Posey fell asleep at last in a velvet chair, her flower crown askew, one hand curled up under her cheek like a question mark. He carried her to the car himself, and on the long drive north, up into hills, where the houses grew bigger and the spaces between them grew wider, he told me a thing that made me go very still in my seat. While we were at the reception, he said, I had my people pack up your apartment. All of it. The clothes. The books. The little girl's stuffed bear, her medicine. It's being delivered to the house as we speak. You had people go through my things. My voice did not rise. That was the worst of it. It did not rise at all. Without asking me, I thought it would help. One less thing for you to carry. It's not help. It's an invasion. You cannot rearrange a person's entire life without asking them first. And this man who I was certain had not apologized to a living soul in years, possibly in decades. He looked at me in the dark of that car, and he said, You're right. I blinked at him. I am unaccustomed, he said slowly, as if the words were unfamiliar in his mouth, to considering anyone but myself. I apologize. From this moment forward, any decision that touches you or the child, I will call you first. You have my word. I did not trust the word yet. Why on earth would I? I'd had a year of pretty words from Russell, and look where every one of them had led me. But I nodded. and we drove on, through tall iron gates that swung open without a sound at our approach, up a long drive flanked by hedges trimmed to within an inch of their lives, until we arrived at a house so large it had a name instead of a number. "This is where you live." My voice came out small, the smallest it had been all that long day. "This is where we live," he said. He carried Posey inside himself, up a great sweeping staircase, down a long hall, to a door painted a soft pale lavender, and he pushed it open with his shoulder, his arms full of my sleeping child. The room was purple, a canopy bed draped in gauzy fabric, a window seat looking out over the dark gardens, stuffed animals arranged in careful rows on the shelves, and in one corner, a little table set with a child's tea set, two small cups and a tiny pot. Because he had heard her, in the church, he had heard a 5-year-old mention tea parties, and he had remembered, and he had set out a tea set, before I had even thought to ask him to come to one. I stood frozen in the doorway as he laid my sleeping daughter down on the bed, as he carefully slipped the shoes from her feet, as he lifted the crooked flower crown from her hair and set it gently on the nightstand, as he drew the blanket up to her chin. His hands knew how to do it. That is what stopped the breath in my chest. A dangerous man's scarred hands, tucking in a blanket with the unthinking tenderness of someone who has done it 1,000 times before, who has done it on 1,000 ordinary nights that he will never get back, and for one moment, one single unguarded moment. In the soft purple light of that room, I saw something cross his face, a grief so old and so deep that it had grown down into the bone of him. He looked at my sleeping daughter, and he was somewhere else entirely, with someone else entirely. Then he closed it, folded it away, like a man closing a drawer he should never have left open, and he turned around and found me standing in the doorway, watching him. He said nothing about it. He showed me to my own room instead. 2 doors down the hall. "My room connects to yours through that door, there," he said, indicating it. "It stays unlocked. But I give you my word, I will never come through it without your invitation, not once, not ever." I believed him. I cannot tell you why, but I did. "We'll talk in the morning," he said. "You'll have your truth, all of it, as I promised." I had one question I could not hold back any longer. "Why did you learn her favorite color?" I asked. "Why build her a room before you even knew I would say yes? Why do all of that for a child you had never even met?" He stood in the doorway a long moment. "Children deserve protection," he said, "always, no matter the circumstances." And then, because I had asked him for the truth, and that one, "She is part of you. That makes her worth protecting." I could not sleep. How could I have? I got up. I crossed to the connecting door he had told me about. He'd said it was unlocked. I turned the handle, slow as I could, and opened it the barest crack. He was at a desk in the corner of his room, his back to me, speaking low into a telephone. In another language. I'd learn soon enough. The language his own father had carried over on a boat, in a card suitcase, a lifetime ago. He had taken off his suit jacket. His shoulder holster hung over the back of his chair, the gun in it plain to see in the lamplight. I should have closed the door. I started to, and then he said, in English, "Yes, she's my wife now. By morning it will all be official." A pause. The voice on the other end, asking something. And then he said a thing that froze me where I stood. "Because I made a promise to the child," he said, "and I do not break promises to children. Not anymore. Not ever again. Not anymore. Not ever again." Which child? Posey? Or some other child? Some child belonging to that old buried grief I'd watched cross his face in the purple room not an hour before? He turned, as if he had felt me there all along. His dark eyes found mine through the narrow gap in the door, and instead of anger at being spied upon, I saw something that looked almost like relief. "You should be resting," he said. "I heard what you said. On the phone. About a promise to a child." I did not look away. Whose child? Dominic? Posey's? Or someone else's? And there it was. The first real question of our whole strange marriage. My hand on the knob of a door he kept locked inside himself. "Tomorrow," he said. His voice came out rougher than before. "I promised you the truth, and you will have it. But not tonight, Nora. Some doors, you only open them once. And once they're open, they do not close again. I looked at him a long moment across the dim rooms. Tomorrow, I said, and I stepped back and let the connecting door swing, nearly shut, nearly. I left it open a crack. I lay awake most of that night, watching the thin line of lamplight come through the gap I'd left. A man I had married at what amounted to gunpoint, 2 rooms over. A child sleeping in a dead girl's favorite color, 2 doors down. And a truth waiting for the morning, like something loaded and cocked. I left the door open a crack because I had watched a monster tuck in a blanket. And I was lying there wondering. The way I think he was wondering on his side of that same door. Whether a person could ever be more than the worst thing they had ever done. He told me the truth the next morning. All of it. He kept that promise too. We sat in his study with the gray dawn light coming in through tall windows. And he told me exactly what he was. A businessman, some would say. The head of an organization, others would say. His family had run certain operations in this region for 3 generations, and he was the 3rd generation of it. And the operations were not the kind you write down on a tax form. He used the soft words first: import, export, real estate, protection, and then he stopped using them. Because I had asked him for the truth, and the soft words he said were just lies wearing a good suit. "You're in the Mafia," I said. Flat. No flinch left in me. "The word is old," he said. "Hollywood ruined it. But yes, I lead what you would call a crime syndicate. Do you hurt people?" He could have lied to me. He didn't, when it's necessary. I was quiet a long time. And then I asked the only question that truly mattered to me. "Whose child were you talking about last night?" On the phone? And he opened the drawer. He told me he'd had a wife once. A daughter. That 3 years ago, a man he had wronged had decided to send him a message. And the message was a car. And the car was waiting outside a school on an afternoon. And his wife and his little girl never came home. Her name was Lucia, he said. And I understood, watching him, that it was the first time he had said that name aloud in 3 years. It came up out of him the way a stone works its way up, out of a wound that never quite healed over it. She was 5 years old, he said. She had 2 weeks to go before her 6th birthday. I felt my own eyes fill for him. For a man who had half blackmailed me into marriage 2 days before. And that, I think, undid him more than any tears of his own ever could have. "That's why the purple room," I said softly. "That's why you learned a little girl's favorite color. Children deserve protection," he said. I failed once. I do not intend to fail again. I reached across the space between us, just for a second, and I laid my hand over the old scar on his knuckles. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. That was the morning our marriage stopped being a transaction. Neither one of us said so out loud. We were not, either of us, the kind who say such things out loud. But the floor shifted under both of us in that gray light, and we both felt it move. Let me tell you about the months that followed, because the months were the part I never once saw coming. Posey adapted the way only children can. Fast, fearless, whole. She named every koi fish in the garden pond, all 11 of them, with names like Mr. Bubbles and Queen Strawberry, and one she simply called Gary. She learned to say good morning in Italian from Carmela, the old cook, and learned to say it wrong in a way that made the whole kitchen ring with laughter every single time. And she took to him, faster than either of us had any right to expect. Papa Dom, she started calling him. Not Papa. Just Papa would have been a betrayal of a ghost of a real father somewhere out in the world. And she was loyal to that ghost, and Dominic respected it. But not just Dom either. Papa Dom, a bridge a 5-year-old built, all on her own, across a gap that 2 grown adults could not figure out how to cross. He taught her to fish. There was a pond at the back of the property. I would watch them from the kitchen window in the early mornings. This enormous, dangerous man and my tiny daughter, sitting side by side on a wooden dock, waiting for the fish to bite. He taught her to bait a hook without flinching. He taught her to cast without snagging the willows. And he taught her to wait, which is the very hardest part, the part most grown men never learn in their whole lives. She caught a sunfish no bigger than his palm, and she screamed so loud with joy that she scared off every other fish in the county. And then they let it go. "Why'd we let it go, Papadum?" she asked, watching it dart away into the deep. "Because it has a family," he said. Waiting for it, he read her bedtime stories, a different voice for every character. The wolf got a low growl. The princess got a sigh. The dragon got something between a truck engine and a bad cough, and she made him do it over and over, until he got it exactly wrong in precisely the right way. I caught him once, standing alone in the dark hall outside her room, doing the dragon voice through the closed door. Because she had made him promise that the dragon, too, would say goodnight. A man who hurt people for his living. Standing in a dark hallway, doing a dragon voice through a closed door. That was the thing about him. The contradiction never resolved. It only deepened. I started at the university. The real nursing program this time. Full-time. He had arranged it before asking me, and I let him have that one, because his heart had been in the right place, even when his methods weren't, and because the program was a thing I had dreamed about for 5 exhausted years. But he kept his word on the larger matter. Protection, he had promised, not surveillance. A driver, a bodyguard. And then I went where I went, and did what I did, and he never once asked me where I had been. I know now what that cost him, to give a frightened person their freedom, and then to discipline yourself not to check the locks behind them. For a man like Dominic, a man who had survived this, long precisely, by knowing everything, it was the hardest discipline of his entire life. Harder than the work. Harder than the violence. He told me so much later. He started leaving the lamp on for me. He never told me he was doing it. The lamp in the front hall, lit and waiting, so that I would not come home to a dark house after a late shift at the hospital. I never mentioned it either, but I stopped switching it off in the mornings. I left it burning for him to find and turn off himself, which was, in its own quiet way, the same as saying thank you. That is how people like us talk. People who have been badly hurt. We don't say the words. The words have been used against us too many times, by too many people, to ever fully trust again. So we leave lamps on stone instead. We let fish go. We pull blankets up to chins. We make the bread. And we mean every bit of it. God, do we mean it? We began having coffee together in the garden in the mornings. We'd sit and watch Posy chase the koi she was strictly forbidden to chase. And we'd talk about nothing at all. And nothing, I came to understand, is the most intimate thing two people can share. Anybody can talk about something. It takes real trust to sit with another soul and talk about nothing. 3 months in, he checked my midterm grades. A small invasion. He simply could not help himself. "You checked my grades," I said. "I take an interest in your successes. That is a violation of my privacy, it is. I'm proud of you anyway." I tried to stay angry with him. I failed. We drank wine in the garden as the sun went down over the hedges, and for the length of 1 glass of wine in all that gold light, I forgot to be afraid of anything at all. It was the happiest I had been in years, which is, of course, exactly when the bottom fell out from under us. It started with a room. There was a wing of that great house that nobody went into, the east wing. The doors stayed shut. The staff knew not to clean it, and they knew better than to ask why. And at the very end of that silent wing was a locked room. Dominic had the only key. One afternoon, while he was away on business, Posy's ball got away from her and rolled all the way down that long forbidden hall, and she chased it, the way children chase things, and I chased her. And at the end of the wing, we found a door. And the door was standing open, Carmela. God loved that old woman. She had gone in to dust it, just the once. Just out of 3 years of grief she'd held back too long, and she had forgotten to lock it behind her when she left. I went in. It was a room frozen in time. A woman's coat still hanging on a hook by the door, as if she might come back for it any minute. A child's crayon drawing still taped to the wall, the tape gone yellow, the corners curling now, and photographs. Photographs everywhere. A dark-haired woman with a laugh you could practically hear in the silver of her eyes. And a little girl. A little girl who looked so much like my Posey that it stopped my heart cold in my chest. The same age, the same gap-toothed grin, the same way of tilting her head at the camera, like she was just about to ask it one of those questions no adult could ever answer. And I understood everything, all at once. The purple room. The fishing, the dragon voice. Why a man who hurt people for a living would stand in a dark hallway and do a dragon voice through a closed door for a child who was not even his. He came home that evening and found me sitting on the floor of that room, in the dust and the curling drawings, holding a photograph of his dead daughter in my two hands. I didn't say I was sorry. I didn't say anything at all. I just held the photograph up to him. And he crossed that room, and he got down on the floor beside me, 50-year-old knees on hardwood, and he took the photograph gently from my hands. Her mother used to braid her hair like that, he said, pointing, every morning. She never let me try. She said, I had hands like a bear, and we sat there on the floor of that room until it went dark around us. And he told me about his girl, and I listened. Just listened. And the listening, he told me much later, was the kindest thing anyone had done for him since the night he stood in a parking garage with the engine still running and a phone pressed to his ear. That was the night I became his wife, not in the bed, not yet, but in the heart, in the only room that has ever really mattered. I should have been happy. I was happy, and that is always when they come for you. It was Russell. Of course it was Russell. The things you think you have buried never stay buried. They wash up on your doorstep at the worst possible hour, dragging the worst possible news behind them. Except Russell was not dead. Dominic let him run all those months ago. And there was a family, the Brennans. 20 years of an understanding between the Brennans and the Olettas, which is really just two predators agreeing, for the time being, not to look hungry at one another. And lately the understanding had been wearing thin. The Brennans found Russell's roadside motel 6 states away. Most of the stolen money already gone on bad cards and on worse luck. And they made him talk. A coward like Russell, you don't even have to ask him twice. He told them everything. About Dominic, about me, about Posey, and he told them where she went to school. Dominic found out on a Tuesday. A man he trusted brought him a phone, and on the phone was a photograph. Posey, in her little school uniform, walking through the front gates of her school, with her bodyguard Sal 20 feet behind her. Exactly where he was supposed to be. And under the photograph, 3 words. Such a shame. The same kind of message that had taken Lucia. I had never once seen that man afraid. I saw it then. For half a second before he locked it back down behind his face. A man standing perfectly still, staring at the same darkness, arriving at the same kind of door it had come to once before. Triple her detail, he told Sal. She doesn't move without 4 men. She doesn't breathe without you in the room. Already done, boss, Sal said. Too fast. I didn't notice. Dominic didn't notice. And he was a man who noticed everything in this world. But love makes you soft, you see. And soft men miss things. That night, he told me about the threat. He did not want to. Every instinct in him wanted to handle it alone, in the dark, the way he handled everything. But he had promised me the truth. And a promise is a promise. There's a threat, he said, against Posey. Because of me, I braced for nothing. There was nothing to brace. I felt no anger at all. What I felt was steel. I stood up out of my chair and I squared my shoulders, exactly the way I had in that cathedral when I gave him my conditions. What do we do? I said, we, not you, we. And I watched 3 years of bottomless loneliness fall off that man's shoulders like a heavy coat he had forgotten he was even wearing. We protect her, he said. With everything I have. And everything I am. Then that's what we'll do, I said. And I climbed the stairs to the purple room, and I sat down beside the bed of a sleeping child who was not mine by blood, but was mine in every other way that has ever counted, and I watched the door. All night. The way he had wished, every night for 3 years, that he had been there to watch another door. He came up around 3 in the morning. He sat down beside me. We did not speak. We just watched the door together. Two people who had lost far too much, standing guard over the one small thing they had left. 3 days later, they took her anyway. Swimming lessons. An indoor pool, 20 minutes from the house. Vetted, secure. Sahal had walked the building himself, twice. 4 men on the detail. And the bracelet on her wrist. The silver one Dominic had made special, with the GPS chip sealed inside it and the little silver star she could to call for help. She thought that bracelet was magic. In a way, it was. It was a Thursday. The lesson ran from 4 o'clock to 5. At 4:52, Sal radioed that everything was clear. At 4:58, the fire alarm went off. A fire alarm in a public building. Everybody moves at once. Everybody floods the exits. Chaos. By design. 100 wet, screaming, half-dressed people pouring out the doors into the parking lot. And 4 trained men trying to keep their eyes on one small girl in the middle of all of it. It takes 90 seconds. That is all it takes. 90 seconds, a hand clamped over a small mouth, and a van with its side door already standing open. At 5:01, Sal radioed that he could not find her. I was at the university when his car came tearing across the lot to get me. I will never forget Dominic's face through the window of that car as long as I live. White. Carved. The face of a man watching the exact thing he barely survived. Once come rolling back around for a second helping. The bracelet, he was saying. Into the phone. In a voice that was not his own. Pull the bracelet. Now. A blue dot. On a screen. Moving north on the interstate. Fast 3 years ago, you understand, he'd had nothing. No chip, no warning, no light at all. They had taken his Lucia down into the dark, and the dark had simply kept her. But this time he had built a light into the dark itself. I'm coming with you, I said. No, I'm a nurse, Dominic. If she's hurt, I am the one who'll know what to do. I am getting in this car, whether you like it or whether you don't. He looked at me, and he understood the way he was always quick to understand the true shape of things, that there was no door on this earth he could lock that would hold a mother back from her child. Get in, he said. I got in. The blue dot ran north for 11 miles, and then it stopped a warehouse. Off an old service road, behind a chain-link fence gone orange with rust. We came up on it in the dark with our headlights off. 6 cars, 20 men. He had a plan, and it was a good one. Hit it from 3 sides, fast and hard. But before he gave the word, before any of us moved, his mansul leaned in the car window to receive the final order. The man who had guarded Posey. The man who had said already done. Boss, too fast, just 3 days before. And the dome light caught his face. And his face was wrong. Dominic had spent 30 years staying alive by reading faces. A man's face, he told me once, is a confession he doesn't even know he's making. He grabbed Sal by the collar and hauled him halfway through the open window. How did they know about the fire alarm? He said. Low. How did they know the schedule? The detail. The exits? His voice dropped down into the soft register, the dangerous one. Sal, look at me. Did you give them my child? And Big Sal. The man who had stood in the hallway smiling at a dragon voice. He started to cry. They have my girls, he whispered. All 3 of them. The Brennans came to my house, boss. They had my daughters sitting at my own kitchen table. They said they'd sent them back to me in pieces. What was I supposed to do? What would you have done? And I watched something break wide open in my husband, because he knew exactly what he would have done. For Posey, he would have given anyone up. Anyone on this earth. How many are inside? He asked. 8. Maybe 10. She's in the back. Northeast corner. There's a man in there with her boss. They told me if it goes wrong. He couldn't finish it. Dominic let go of his collar. And he made a decision in about second flat that he had spent a whole different kind of life learning how to make. Go to their man inside, he told Sal. Tell him the deal is still on. Tell him I never showed. Buy me 60 seconds at that northeast door. You do that, and I will get your daughters back myself. You have my word. Sal stared at him. After what I did to you? You did it for your children, Dominic said. I would have done worse for mine. Go. And Sal went. I stared at my husband in the dark. You're letting him live, I said. He was protecting his family. The same as we're protecting ours. The Brennans made a monster out of that man the very same way they're trying to make monsters out of all of us. He checked the weapon in his hand. I don't kill men for loving their children, Nora. That is the line. That has always been the line. And the last of my fear, the fear he himself had put into me in that cathedral so many months before, it went out, like a candle. But the warm kind, the kind that goes out only because the sun has finally come up and you don't need it anymore. Tell me what to do, I said. Stay behind me. Stay low. When we get to her, you check her over. Hands, head, breathing. You're the nurse. That is your job, and it is the most important job there is. You hold the most precious thing in this whole world, and you do not, under any circumstances, let go. I won't let go, I said. We went in through the northeast door 60 seconds later when Sal's voice on the radio said the word clear. The dark of that warehouse swallowed us whole. It smelled of rust and old motor oil and cold, and somewhere ahead of us, in the black, a sound, the smallest sound in the whole world. Click, click, click. A little silver star being pressed by a little thumb, over and over and over again. The panic button on a bracelet that a grieving man had designed and built out of nothing but love, and the bottomless terror of losing one more child. Click, click, click. She was alive. She was calling. And we were coming. There was a man in that back room. I could see the shape of him against the one dirty window, standing a small huddled shape in the corner. And the small shape was pressing a star and whispering a word, over and over. Into the dark, Papa Dom, Papa Dom, Papa Dom, not help, not mommy. His name, she was not for help. She was calling for him. I will not tell you the details of what my husband did to the man in that room. There are children who might hear this story someday, and some doors you do not open for them. I will tell you only that the man went down, and that he did not get back up, and that Dominic did not kill him, because Posey was watching with her wide eyes, and because he had made a promise on a dock by a pond that he would let things go when a child was looking. And then he was on his knees, in the dirt, and Posey was in his arms, wet, cold, shaking like a leaf. Her swimming bag still hanging off one shoulder, her small thumb worn raw and red from pressing the star. You came, she whispered into his neck. I pressed it, and I pressed it, and I pressed it. And you came. I'll always come, he said. Always. And then I did my own job. Hands, head, breathing. The nurse, and not the mother, for 90 crucial seconds. Checking my own daughter for the harm I could not see in the dark. She's okay, I breathed out. Dom, she's not hurt. She's okay. 3 years before, he had knelt down on cold concrete in a parking garage, and a man had told him his little girl was never coming home. And now he knelt in the dirt of a warehouse floor, and a woman told him this little girl was the same Neil, the same cold floor. The opposite news entirely. He had made Sal a promise, and he keeps his promises. All of them. Especially the ones that cost him everything. The Brennans had 3 little girls held in a house somewhere. Sal's daughters. And you do not take children back from a family like the Brennans with cars and guns. Not without it turning into a war. And a war means more warehouses. More cold rooms. More small thumbs pressing stars in the dark. On both sides of it, because the Brennans have grandchildren too. God help us, everyone is somebody's child. He had spent 30 years living inside that terrible arithmetic, and he was tired of the arithmetic. So he did the thing his own father would have called the one unforgivable sin. The thing that, 20 years before, Dominic himself would have called unforgivable. He picked up a telephone. And he called a federal man, the kind with a clean desk and a clean conscience and a list, somewhere in a drawer, with Dominic's name sitting right near the top of it. I have something you want, he said. Everything. Books, names, routes, 20 years of the Brennans' business, and a good deal of my own besides. Why? The federal man asked. Suspicious, the way they're trained to be. Because I want out. Men like you don't get out. Men like me didn't used to, he said. I'm trying something new. Now listen to me. There are 3 little old Brennans are holding right now. You move on that house tonight with what I'm about to give you, and you get those 3 girls out clean. The girls come first. The rest of it comes after. And for me, new names. For a wife and a child. A quiet street in a quiet town that nobody like me has ever heard of. When he hung up the phone, he sat alone in the dark of his study, and he understood that he had just signed away everything. Everything his grandfather had built. Everything his father had built. Everything he himself had built, with his own scarred hands, over 30 hard years. And he felt light for the first time in his whole life. Like a man who had been carrying an enormous stone up a long hill for 50 years and had finally been allowed to set it down in the grass. I came in. He told me all of it. You're giving it all up, I said. For us, for all of you, he said. For Sal's girls. For Posey. For you. For Lucia. And for the man I should have been before they ever made me into this one. I lifted his skirt hand and pressed it to my cheek, the very way he had touched mine in that cathedral a whole lifetime ago. You are the only man I ever met, I told him, who would burn his own castle to the ground just to set somebody else free. The feds moved on the house that very night. They got all 3 girls out, cold and frightened and weeping and whole. I never saw Sal again. He went his way, with a new name on a new street, far from ours, because 2 men who know each other's worst nights cannot live on the same block. But years and years later, through the kind of quiet channel that still whispers to my husband, now and again, we heard that his oldest girl had grown up to become a school teacher, and that she was good at it. We'll take that. It is more than anyone in this whole story ever earned. But the Brennans did not go quietly into that good night. I knew they wouldn't. You do not take 20 years away from a family like that without them coming around, at least once, to say a proper goodbye. They came over the east wall on the very last night, the night before we were due to vanish into our new names and our new street. The boxes were all packed and taped. The whole of our old life was folded up and ready to be left behind, like a heavy winter coat hung up in the first warm week of spring. 4 of them came. In the dark, he had already sent most of his men away by then. You do not bring an army with you into witness protection. So it was just Dominic and 2 of his old loyal ones, and me and Posey inside the house behind him. He met them in the garden. In the garden where we drank our wine and watched the sun go down. Where Posey named the koi. Where I had been the happiest I had ever been in my life, on the very evening before the bottom fell out. Because that, I'm telling you, is always exactly when they come. It was fast, and it was ugly, and it was close. He took 2 of them down. His old loyal men took a 3rd, and the 4th one, the last one. He got a shot off before he fell, and it caught my husband, low, in the side, in the soft place where the body keeps the things it cannot live without. I heard Posey scream from an upstairs window. I heard his knees hit the stone of the garden path, and I ran. He was lying on his back, looking up at the stars, when I reached him, almost peaceful. And I knew that look. God forgive me. I knew that look too well. I had seen it on dying men's faces in the hospital. It is the look of a man who has decided, somewhere deep down, that it is all right now to stop, and I would not allow it. Don't you do this, I said, my hands already on the wound, already pressing down hard, already doing the very thing I had spent 3 years and a whole nursing degree learning how to do. Don't you dare do this to me. You do not get to save the whole world and then quit on me in a flower bed. That was never the deal. That was never once the deal, Nora. Don't talk. Save your breath. Pressure. Look at my face. Look at my face, Dominic. You promised that little girl you would come every single time she called. You don't get to break that promise by dying in a garden. Any promise but that one. Anything but that one. There was no light, like they say there is at the end. There was only my face above his, furious and refusing. And there was a 5-year-old's voice somewhere, behind me, screaming Papa Dom, calling him back up out of the dark, the exact same way he had once come down into it for her. And I understood, kneeling there in his blood in that garden, a thing I had half known for months, that this man had been half trying to die for 3 solid years, lying down in warehouses, walking out into gardens, looking for the dark with a kind of patience that everyone mistook for courage, but that was really only a very slow goodbye. And I would not let the stone win. Not that night. Not ever. So he stayed. God help him. With everything he had left in him, which by then was not very much at all. He stayed. He woke up 4 days later, not in any hospital, because a man like Dominic does not get to wake up in a hospital, with its records and its questions on for its a room that did not officially exist, a doctor who did not ask any questions, all of it part of the deal. I was asleep in the chair beside his bed, after 4 days of not sleeping at all, and Posy was asleep in my lap, with one thumb near her mouth and her other small hand fisted tight in my sleeve. She woke first. Her whole face cracked open like a sunrise. "Papa Dom, you're not dead." "Not dead, Piccolina. Mommy said you might be." But I told her you couldn't be. She climbed up onto the edge of the bed, careful, so careful, around the bandages. "Because you promised you'd always come. And you can't come if you're dead." "That's just math. That's just math." He agreed. We disappeared 3 weeks later. New names. A street in a town in a quiet corner of this country that none of us had ever had any reason to know. A place with one diner, and a hardware store, and a small white church whose bells are friendly, and small, and do not ring like an accusation. He became a different man there. He fixes things now. Fences, fishing reels, lawn mowers. He fixed the church organ one Saturday, and earned a homemade pie and a permanent place in a whole town's heart that he swears, to this day, he never once deserved. I finished my degree. I work 3 days a week at the little clinic on Main Street. The whole town loves me. They do not know that I once stood in a borrowed dress in a great cathedral and got claimed at the altar by a dangerous man. They only know that I am the nurse who is kind to the scared ones. Posy is 7 now. 2 good, quiet years on that street will do that to a 5-year-old. She has a purple bicycle. She still fishes with him at dawn, on a different pond, in a different state, under different stars that somehow look exactly the same as the old ones. She caught a bass last summer that, she swears, was up feet long. It was 8 inches. We let it go. It has a family. There is one more thing I have to tell you. Maybe the most important thing of all, after we got settled, after the dust had finally cleared, after I could see the whole man under the stone at last and clearly, he did the one I never in my life expected. He sat me down at the table of our small kitchen one evening, and he gave me my freedom. For real this time. Papers, drawn up quiet by a lawyer in another state. Half of everything that was left, which wasn't an empire anymore, but was more than enough. New names of my very own, names he swore he would never learn. A street he promised he would never. "You never chose this," he said. "You chose the lesser of your 2 terrors, in a church, on the worst morning of your life. That is not a choice, that's Nora, it's survival. So here is a real one." "Why?" I asked him. The very same question I had asked him in the cathedral. "Because in these months," he said, "I have watched you build a life out of nothing, watched you run into the dark for that girl, when every sane person runs out of it, watched you put your 2 hands on me in that garden, and flat refuse to let me go. And somewhere in all of that watching, I stopped wanting your presence, Nora. I started wanting your choice. And a man cannot have a person's true choice unless he first gives them the power to leave." I looked at him a long, long time across that little kitchen table. Then I stood up, and I walked over to the kitchen drawer, the one where we kept the rubber bands and the takeout menus, and the spare key, and I took out those freedom papers, and I tore them once in half, and then in half again, and I dropped the pieces in the trash, right on top of the morning's coffee grounds and the eggshells. "I do not need any time to think about it," I said. "I had a door you never once locked, for 3 whole months. I had 100 chances to run. I had my freedom the entire time, Dominic. You just never noticed that you'd already given it to me, Nora. I choose to stay." My voice did not shake. Not one bit. Not because I have to. Not because of the money, or the danger, or even the girl. Because I want to. Because somewhere between the dock and the dragon voice, and that lamp in the hall you think I never noticed, I stopped being a woman who got claimed. I came around the table to him, and I started being a woman who claims back. There is a part of this story I skipped over. I skipped it because for the longest time I could not say it out loud. The same way Dominic could not say Lucia's name for 3 years. Some things just sit in you, like a stone in the bottom of a coat pocket, and you carry them around for so long that you forget you were ever even allowed to set them down. But I am old now, and old women have surely earned the right to tell the parts they kept quiet for so long. So let me go back to the weeks right after the warehouse, but before the garden, before the night they came over the east wall. There was a strange stretch in there, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, where the worst was supposed to be behind us, and the worst had not yet arrived, and we lived together in that held breath in between. Posey would not sleep alone. You would not have expected it, the way she had bounced back in the daylight. Children are made of something the rest of us lose somewhere along the road. By every morning she was naming koi again and demanding pancakes shaped like animals and begging Bruno to teach her another word in Italian. You'd have looked at her in the sunlight and sworn nothing on earth had ever touched her. But at night, the warehouse came back for her. The first night she woke up screaming. I was halfway down the hall before my own feet knew I'd left the bed. I found her sitting up in the middle of the purple room, her eyes wide open but not truly awake, pressing her thumb against the bare skin of her wrist. Over and over, click, 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 except there was no bracelet there anymore. The feds had taken it away for evidence, so she was pressing her own bare skin. A star that was no longer there, calling for help, in her sleep, in a house that was already perfectly safe, to a man who was already on his way. I gathered her up into my arms. I held her. I said all the things you say. I'm here. Mommy's right here. You're safe, baby. You're home. And she looked up at me with those wide, unfocused, dreaming eyes. And she said the thing that finally broke me clean in two. I pressed it, she whispered. And nobody came. Somebody came, sweetheart. Papa Dom came. Don't you remember? He came for you. In the dream nobody comes. What do you say to that? Tell me. What does anyone alive say to that? I held her until she slipped back down into sleep. And then I sat on the edge of that canopy bed in the dark, and I cried the way you cry when you cannot make a single sound. The silent heaving kind, that hurts your whole chest, because I had held it all together. All the way through the warehouse, and the cars, and the 4 days at his bedside, and a 5-year-old sleeping confession had finally taken the legs right out from under me. I did not hear him come in, but I felt the mattress shift, and then his hand was on my back. The scarred one. He didn't say a single word. He had learned, somewhere along the way, that there are certain griefs you do not fix with words. You just lay a hand on them, so the person carrying it knows that they are not carrying it entirely alone. We sat like that a long time. 2 grown people, on the edge of a child's bed in the middle of the night, watching her small chest rise and fall. I did this, I finally whispered. I brought her into your world. I said yes in that church. This is on me. No, Dom. No, his voice was very quiet and very certain. You said yes to a roof over her head, to food in her belly, to a future. You said yes the way a drowning woman grabs hold of a rope, and you do not blame a drowning woman for grabbing the rope. The world that hurt her, Nora, that world is mine. I built it. My father built it before me. 3 generations of us built it. You walked into a fire that was already burning. You did not light it. She presses a star that isn't there. He was quiet a moment. I know, he said. I've watched her do it. 3 nights now. From the hall, and I understood then that he had not been sleeping either. That every single night since the warehouse, this man had been standing out in the dark hallway outside my daughter's door, listening for the small sound of a thump skin, the exact way he must have wished. That's hide for 3 years. That he could have stood outside another door, in another house, and heard another small sound, and gone in, and been in time. You can't fix it by standing in the hall, I said, gently. No, he agreed, but I can be there when she wakes. That part, at least, I can do. And here is the thing I most want you to understand about the man I married. The thing it took me months to see, and a whole lifetime to truly appreciate. He could not undo what had been done. Not to Lucia, not to Posey. He had spent 30 years being a man who could fix any problem on earth with money, or with force, or with fear, and he had finally run straight into the one category of thing that all the money and force and fear in the whole wide world cannot touch. A child's nightmare, a wound to the soul of someone you love more than your own life. And instead of breaking himself to pieces against the unfixable, the way I had half expected him to, the way violent men so often do, he simply decided to show up every night, in the hall, so that when the dream took her and nobody came, somebody would already be standing there. So that the distance between I pressed it and nobody came, Sun Antari came, would be made as small as one human being could possibly make it. That is not the kind of love they write the songs about. It is so much better than that. It is the kind that stands in a dark hallway at 3 in the morning, asking for nothing in return, just listening, just ready. The change in Posey came on slowly. The way real change in a child always does. You don't see it happening day to day. You only look up one ordinary afternoon and realize you cannot remember the last time it happened. It was Carmela who found the key to it. Carmela had worked for that family for 30 years. She had cooked for Dominic when he was just a boy with skinned knees. She had cooked for Lucia. She had a face like a walnut, and hands that never once stopped moving, and a heart, I came to learn, big enough to hold 3 whole generations of other people's grief. One morning I walked into the kitchen and found Posey standing up on a step stool at the big counter, an apron tied twice around her little middle, flour all the way up to her elbows, very seriously rolling out a lump of dough while Carmela narrated beside her in a low, patient stream of broken English and full, flowing Italian. Like this, bambina. No. Soft hands, the dough. He knows it if you are angry. Soft hands now. Soft hands, Posey repeated. And she pressed her 2 small palms down into that dough so gently that it was for all the world like she was tucking a baby into bed. I stopped in the doorway. I did not go in. I just watched, because something had happened to my daughter while I wasn't looking. The flinch was gone. For weeks for after the warehouse she'd had a flinch. A door slamming somewhere in the house. A car backfiring out on the road. A voice raised, even in play. And her whole small body would snap tight as a fist, and her eyes would go far away. And here she was, flour on her nose, calm as a Sunday morning, putting a child made of dough to bed. Carmela caught my eye over the top of Posey's head, and she did not smile exactly. She just gave me a look, a long, steady look that said, as clear as words, I have done this before. I know how to bring a little one back from the dark. Let me do it. I let her. I learned only later that Carmela had taught Lucia to make this very same bread, on this very same counter, with these very same words. Soft hands. The dough. He knows it if you are angry. And I understood, standing in that doorway, that this old woman, who had loved and lost a child of someone else's as if she were her own, who had walked past that locked east wing door 1,000 silent times, and never once gone in until grief finally overtook her with a dustcloth. In her hand, this old woman had found the one single thing she could still do. She could not bring Lucia back, but she could teach another little girl the same bread. She could pour 30 years of stored-up love into a second small pair of soft hands. She could make the kitchen warm again, the way it had been warm before the car outside the school, before the whole great house went silent. That is how the house healed, not all at once, not with any one grand gesture. It healed the way a body heals a deep wound, cell by patient cell, in the small daily work of ordinary people deciding to love again. After love had once cost them everything they had, the bread, the dragon voice, the lamp left burning in the hall, the man standing guard at 3 in the morning, the koi with their 11 foolish names. Grief does not leave a house just because you ask it to. It leaves when you fill up the rooms with so much ordinary, stubborn tenderness that the grief can no longer find anywhere to sit down. I came into the kitchen at last. I tied an apron around my own waist. Show me, I said, to my daughter. And Posey, 5 years old, flour to her elbows, the warehouse falling a little further behind her with every passing day, looked up at me with the absolute authority of a master craftsman and said, "Soft hands, Mommy. The dough. He knows. We made bread. The three of us. All that long golden morning." And when Dominic came in from the dock, smelling of pond water and the cold of the early air, he stopped dead in the doorway, exactly the way I had. And he looked at the whole scene of it, his kitchen, full of flour and women and the laughter of a child. The kitchen that had been nothing but a tomb for 3 long years. And I watched that man's face do a thing I had never once seen it do. It came apart, quietly, the way river ice comes apart in the spring, no drama to it at all. Just a long, slow, helpless letting go of a hardness it had been holding clenched all winter long. He did not cry. I told you. He had forgotten how. But he stood there in the doorway, and he gripped the frame of it with one hand, and he let the warmth of that room come pouring into him like heat into a pair of frozen hands. "There's flour on your nose, Papa Dom." Posey informed him gravely. There was not. She just wanted him closer. He came closer. He bent down, and he let her put the flour on his nose herself, so that it would be true. And Carmela, over at the counter, turned away and pretended very, very hard to be busy with the oven door. But I saw her. I saw her wipe her eyes. With the back of one flour-white hand. 30 years she had cooked in that kitchen. And she had just stood there and watched it come all the way back to life. I want to tell you about the wine glasses. It is a small thing, the very smallest thing. But it is the thing I think about most, all these long years later. When I try to explain to my own self what actually happened between me and that man. Because the big moments, the cathedral and the warehouse and the garden, those are the moments you would put into a movie. But the real truth of a marriage does not live inside the big moments. It lives inside the wine glasses. There were 2 of them. Heavy crystal, the kind that cost more than I used to make in a whole shift at the diner. They lived in a cabinet in the dining room of that enormous house, and for the first weeks I never once touched them. Because they felt as though they belonged to the life that had been there before me. To the dark-haired woman with the laugh you could hear in the silver of her eyes. But the night he checked my grades, the night we drank wine out in the garden, those were the glasses he brought out. Without thinking about it, I believe, he simply reached into the cabinet and took down the 2 glasses that were sitting there. I knew whose they had been the very second I saw them in his hands. And I almost said something. I almost said, not these, please, not hers. Because I thought it would wound him. I thought I would be making the man drink out of a dead woman's glass. But I held my tongue, and I drank, and much later, years later, when I had finally earned the right to ask him, I asked, whether it had bothered him that night, whether he had even noticed, and he looked at me a long moment, and then he said, a thing I have never once forgotten. They were just sitting in the dark, and he said, for 3 years. 2 beautiful things shut up in a cabinet in the dark, never used. Because using them felt like a betrayal. Like I'd be admitting out loud that she was really gone. Like I'd be agreeing to go on being happy in a world she was no longer in. He turned the glass slowly in his scarred fingers, and then, one evening I reached in and took them down without even thinking. For you, and I drank out of the one, and you drank out of the other, and the whole sky turned to gold over the hedges. And nothing terrible happened, Nora. The world did not end. She did not come back to accuse me. The glasses did not shatter in our hands. He set his own glass down on the table. They were made to be used, he said. She would have hated them sitting in the dark like that. She had a real temper about waste, my Lucia's mother. She would have said, what are you doing, you foolish man? Drink. The dead do not want your misery. The dead want you to live. I reached across the table and took his hand. So that is what I am doing, he said. I am using the good glasses. I am letting the kitchen smell like bread. I am standing in the hall at 3 in the morning. I am drinking the wine, and watching the sky go gold over the hedges. His voice went rough. I am living. After 3 years of flatly refusing to. And I want you to know that it is the single hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than the work. Harder than the warehouse. The very hardest thing in the world, for a man like me, is to allow himself to be happy again after the worst has already happened to him once. Because now you know that it can happen. You know exactly how it feels to lose it all, and you go and let yourself love anyway. Why? I asked him. Why let yourself, if you know firsthand how it can end? And he gave me the answer that I have built the whole rest of my life around. The very same answer I would give to you now. If you were sitting across this table from me, with your own stone in your own coat pocket, wondering whether it might ever be worth setting it down. Because the only other choice, he said, is to be a stone. And I was a stone for 3 years, Nora. I felt nothing at all, and so nothing could hurt me. That was the whole point of it. But here is what they don't warn you about. Nothing could touch me either. Not one sunrise. Not one child's laugh. Not the feel of a woman's hand laid over a scar in the dark. The price of feeling nothing, it turns out, is that you feel nothing. The price of never grieving again is that you never get to love again, either. He looked at me steadily. I would rather lose everything twice over than be a stone for one more single day. That is the thing you and that little girl taught me. You cannot protect your heart by killing it first. All you do is die early, and you do not even get the rest. We finished the wine, and then we washed the 2 glasses by hand, the 2 of us, together at the sink, him washing and me drying, and we put them back up in the cabinet. Not in the dark anymore. We used them all the time after that. We use them still. They are chipped now, the both of them. A whole marriage's worth of small accidents and clumsy, late nights. We never once replaced them, because that is the other thing he taught me. My husband, the reformed stone, the fence mender, the dragon voice man. You do not throw away the things that get chipped. The chips are the proof that you used them. The chips are the proof that you lived. He died on a Thursday. I want to say it plainly, the way he himself taught me to say the hard things. No soft words. The soft words are only lies in a good suit. He died on a Thursday morning in the spring, in our own bed, in our own small house, on our own quiet street, with the window standing open, and the smell of cut grass drifting in, and my hand wrapped around his scarred one. He was old by then. It was not a car outside a school. It was not the Brennans, or a man in a warehouse, or a debt finally come due. It was only time. Only the body at last, setting down a load it had carried a very long way. He went easy, in the end, which is a great deal more than a man like him had any right to expect, and we both of us knew that, and neither of us said it out loud, because we never once were the kind of people who say such things out loud. But I will tell you what he did say, near the very end. When the words were coming hard for him, he turned his head on the pillow, and he looked at me with those dark eyes gone soft and pale around the edges, and he asked me, did I keep it? I didn't understand him at first. Keep what, my love? The promise. His voice was a thread now, the very way mine had been a thread, once, a whole lifetime ago, in a great cold cathedral. To the little girl. I promised her. I told her I wouldn't make you cry, and I am an old woman. I have buried my own parents. I have buried my sister Bridget. I have buried more friends than I care to sit down and count. And I have learned, the long hard way, that you cannot ever truly promise another living soul that you will not make them cry. The crying is the toll we pay for the loving. He made me cry 1,000 times over the course of 40 years. He made me cry that very afternoon, sitting there watching him go from me. But that was not what he meant, and I knew it. You never once made me cry the bad kind, I told him. Not one single time. 40 years, Dominic. You only ever made me cry the good kind. The kind that comes from being loved so completely that it just spills right over the edges of a person. You kept it. You kept the only promise that ever truly mattered. Something eased in his face then. Tell Posey, he said. I'll tell her I came every time. Every single time she pressed the star. Even at the very end. Tell her I'm just in the next room now. Tell her I will still hear her. If she calls, I'll tell her. I promise you, I'll tell her. He closed his eyes. And the very last thing my husband ever said in this world, the man. The whole city used to carry so carefully across the crowded room the stone who learned how to be a man, the bad man, who spent the entire back half of his life trying so hard to be a good one. The last thing he said was a name, Lucia, he whispered. The way a man says it, when he is fully arriving somewhere he has been traveling toward for a very, very long time. And I held his hand, and I did not let go, and I told him that it was all right now, that he could go to her, that the door was open, that he had kept us all safe long enough, that he could finally stop standing, watch in the hall. He went on the very next breath, and I will tell you the truth of it. I sat there beside him a long, long time, and I was not only grieving, though God knows that I was grieving. I was also, somewhere far underneath it, glad for him. Because for 3 years he had been a stone who could not feel the rain, and then for 40 years he had been a man who felt the whole of it. The entire catastrophe of loving, and losing and daring to love again. And now, at last, he got to set it down. And somewhere, I had to believe it. I needed with my whole heart to believe it. A dark-haired little girl was running toward him across the grass, with her arms thrown wide open, asking him whatever in the world had taken him so long. Posey came that same night. She drove 4 hours without stopping once. She walked into our bedroom, a grown woman now, a nurse herself, a mother herself. And she looked at the man lying in that bed, the man who had taught her to bait a hook, and to cast a line, and, hardest of all, to wait. The man who had done the dragon voice through a closed door. The man who had come every single solitary time she pressed the silver star, and she did not fall to pieces. She is her mother's daughter, and she is her Papa Dom's girl through and through, and she did the very thing he would have done in her place. She crossed the room, and she got down on her knees there beside the bed, the exact same way he had once knelt down for her, on cold marble, in a great cathedral, when she was just 5 years old, and she took his cold hand into both of her warm ones. "You came every time," she whispered to him, "so now I'm going to come for you. I'm here, Papa Dom. Do you see? I came, and only then did she let herself cry. The good kind and the bad kind all run together at once, which is the only kind there ever really is in the end. We buried him in the small cemetery, out behind the little church with the friendly bells. Not under his real name. He never did get that name back, and he never once wanted it. He lies there under the name he chose for our second life. The fence mender's name. The organ fixer's name. The name a whole town came to love, without ever knowing the first thing about what it had cost the man to wear it. The whole town came to the burying. They did not know the half of it. They believed they were laying to rest a kind old man who had been good with his hands and gentle with the frightened ones. And they were right. That is exactly who they were burying. It only took him a whole hard life to become that man, and they got to know only the finished thing. The way you see a smooth stone resting in the bed of a river, and you never once stop to think about the long, patient years of water it took to wear it that soft. I put 2 photographs into the casket with him. You already know which 2, the lost one and the saved one, tucked in side by side against his heart, both of his daughters, going down into the dark along with him, so that he would never ever have to stand in any hallway alone again. So here is where I am sitting, telling you all of this. I'm at my own kitchen table. The afternoon light is going gold through the window, the very way it always did out over those hedges, a whole lifetime ago. There are 2 wine glasses up in the cabinet behind me. Heavy crystal, both of them chipped. And tonight, when Posey and the grandchildren come over for their supper, I am going to take them down and use them, because the dead do not want our misery. The dead want us to live. He taught me that. A woman with a fierce temper about waste taught it to him first, and he taught it to me, and now here I am, teaching it to you. You are carrying something. I know that you are. You would not have stayed sitting here this long with an old woman's long, winding story if you weren't. Maybe it is a grief. Maybe somebody you loved got taken from you, by a car outside a school, or by a Thursday morning in the spring, or by nothing more dramatic than the long, slow arithmetic of the years. And maybe you have gone and turned your own self into a stone, so that the rain can't get at you anymore. And maybe you have been telling yourself, all this while, that it is strength, when the truth of it is that it is only a very slow goodbye. Or maybe it is a fear. Maybe the worst already happened to you, once, and you have quietly decided, somewhere deep down, that you could not possibly survive it a second time. So you keep your whole heart locked up tight and torch it in a room at the end of an east wing. And you walk past that closed door every single day of your life, and you never once let yourself go in. Or maybe you have simply decided that it is too late for you now. That you are too old, too tired, too far on down the road. That the good glasses are meant to stay in the dark from here on out. That the kitchen is allowed to just go on being a tomb. That a person only ever gets the one single chance at a family, and you already went and used yours up. I am here to tell you the very thing that a 50-year-old criminal in a charcoal suit once told a broke and abandoned single mother in a borrowed wedding dress, all those long years ago. In the smoking wreckage of the worst morning of her whole life, you always have a choice. They are rarely as clean or as clear as you would wish them to be. But you have one. You always have one. You can stay a stone. Or you can reach into the cabinet and take down the good glasses. You can keep the heavy door locked tight. Or you can leave it open a single crack, the way I did on that first dark and terrible hour. Not because you are brave, but because some small, stubborn, secret part of you is still lying there awake, in the dark, quietly wondering whether a person might possibly turn out to be more than the very worst thing that ever happened to them. They can. I promise you that they can. I married the living proof of it, and I buried the living proof of it, and I am the living proof of it myself. Because, the morning that Russell left me standing alone at that altar, I was certain my whole life was over and done with, and it turned out it had not even properly started yet. It started when a hard man knelt down on cold marble to speak gently to a frightened little girl. It started when a shaking woman put her hand into a scarred one and did not pull it back. It started, though the very best things always seem to, on the precise morning that everything else fell apart. So drink the wine. Use the chipped glasses, every one of them. Let your kitchen fill up with the smell of bread. Stand in the dark hallway at 3 a.m. for the people that you love, and ask them for nothing at all in return. Leave the lamp burning in the hall. Let the fish go free. It has a family of its own. And keep your promises, especially the small ones, the ones a child holds out to you on a trembling little pinky finger in the middle of a church. And when the worst has already come and gone, and you are dead certain that there is nothing left inside of you that is worth the giving, give it anyway. Because love is the only thing in this whole world that grows the more of it you give away. A hoarding man ends his days with a cold house, and a locked room, and a stone right where his heart was supposed to be. I knew that man. I loved that man. And I watched 2 little girls, and 1 bone-tired woman, and 1 old cook with all up her arms to him, slow and patient as water working on stone, how to become something far better than he was. And he let them. That was his whole genius in the very end. Not the empire, not the power, not the careful way a whole city used to carry his name across a crowded room. His genius was that, after everything that had been done to him, he found a way to let himself be loved. And he let himself love right back. And he did the whole of it knowing full well exactly what it might cost him, because he had already paid that price once before, and he chose, with both eyes open, to risk paying it all over again. That is the bravest thing I have ever in my life seen a single human being do. Braver than the warehouse. Braver than walking into a cathedral full of strangers to collect on a debt. Braver, even, than taking that bullet in the garden. The very bravest thing a person can do is to love again, after love has already broken their heart clean in 2 once before. You can do it. I did it. He did it. It is not too late for you. Whatever it is you have been telling yourself in the dark, the bells are ringing somewhere, even now. Old bells. The kind that shake 200 years of dust loose from the rafters. Do not hear them as an accusation. Hear them, instead, as an invitation. And walk on in, because you never can tell. You might just walk in one cold, bright morning to collect on an old debt and walk back out again with the only life that was ever truly worth the living. I did. And that, my dear, after everything, after all of it, that is more than enough.